think there's a problem. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Again, for the last time, can someone open their audio and tell me if my voice is clear?
Your voice is
Yes.
clear.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we shall start our discussion this afternoon. One of the most important topic in fundamentals of nursing is about maintaining skin integrity. And I know and I understand that you keep on hearing skin integrity, especially in our lab session, where teachers would always tell you impaired skin integrity. Okay, but do you know exactly what is skin integrity? Okay, skin integrity refers to a normal and intact skin. Okay, that is skin integrity. And one of the most important nursing role or nursing responsibility of a nurse when you go to the hospital is to ensure that the skin of your patients are maintained. Okay? The skin integrity of your patients are maintained. That is your role as a nurse. Now, before we move through with our discussion, I would like to present to you what are the learning objectives for today's session. First, discuss the functions of the skin. Number two, discuss the types of skin impairment. Specifically, we're going to discuss what are the different types of wounds. And most importantly, we're going to discuss what are pressure ulcers. And of course, we're going to discuss also the phases of wound healing. What are the complications if you have wounds? Okay. Another important topic would be regarding the causes and what are the risk factors for the development of pressure ulcer. We will discuss the stages of pressure ulcer and most importantly, the application of the nursing process with regards to skin integrity of your patient. Okay, but don't you worry, we have 2 weeks, this week until next week. Our topic is only about skin integrity and we're going to focus and discuss more about this topic. Okay, now, as I mentioned earlier, one of the important nursing role, okay, or nursing responsibility of a nurse is to maintain or to ensure that the patient's skin integrity is intact. But why is it needed for us nurses to maintain the skin or skin integrity of our patients? Technically, for various reasons. Okay, I know you are already familiar with the main functions of our skin. Remember in your anatomy and physiology, your teacher would always say, skin is the largest, it is the largest part of our body. Correct? Aside from being the largest part of our body, our skin provides or serves various functions. And on the slide right now are the 7 functions of the skin. These are exactly the different functions why you need to protect and maintain the skin integrity of our patient. Of course, number 1 is sensory. Who can tell me sensory functions of our skin? How does our skin provide sensory functions? Let us hear from students. When we see sensory functions, what does it do to our body?
It contains the sensory receptors.
So if our skin contains sensory receptors, what does it do?
Like if you are in danger, these receptors are active, and immediately you remove your hand or any part that absorb to that from the injury or from the dangerous.
Okay, very good. She said, again, what's your name, ma'am?
Mona Al-Fazari.
Okay, Muna says sensory functions because our skin contains a lot of nerve endings. Okay, or it can sense a lot of sensation. And she gave an example. Number one is pain receptors. If a person is confronted by injury or accident, the line of defense in our skin, because it contains pain receptors, eventually the person immediately can senses any problems. Oh, there is pain. Okay, but aside from pain, there are also other sensations that our skin serves. For example, when someone touches you, because you feel it because you have senses in your skin. Okay, you can also feel cold, you can feel warm, you can feel hot. Okay, those are sensations. And you can feel all those sensations because of the sensory functions of your skin. Very good, Muna. Okay, how about the secretory function? What does the skin do to our body when it says secretory function? Can someone open the audio and answer? What does the skin secretes?
Secrete the sweat and the sebum to maintain the temperature of the skin of the body.
Okay, who is this, please?
Suha.
Okay, Suha, very good. She says our body secretes important fluid or chemicals. Specifically, our skin secretes sweat. You know, all of us are sweating. Okay, and the very purpose of sweat is to regulate our body temperature. That's why if you feel hot, the tendency is for you to sweat excessively in order to regulate the temperature of our body. Very good, Suha. Okay, and it is almost similar with heat regulatory functions. Again, because of the secretion of sweat, our body is able to regulate heat, okay? Cold and heat. That's the function of our skin. Now, we also have an important function of our skin, which is excretory function. From the word itself, excrete, what does it excrete? Could someone open the audio? What do we mean when we say excretory function? Excrete means it is producing, it is discarding, it is releasing something. Okay.
Sweat?
Who is this?
Yusuf.
Yusuf, okay. Yusuf, do you have any idea about excretory function?
There are glands in the skin which produce sweat. They excrete sweat to regulate the body's temperature and also to drain excess water.
Okay, very good. Okay, excretory means excrete or release or discard something. And remember, our skin, it has also skin glands. These skin glands excrete. It could either be water, it could either sweat, it could either be salt or any waste product from our body, and that is possible because of our skin. Okay, and because of excretory function. Okay, number 5, synthetic function of the skin. Could someone explain how does our skin serves as for synthetic function?
Our body synthesize some products like vitamin D when we expose it to sunlight.
Okay, very good. Okay, synthetic function means remember our skin has vitamin D. Okay, and it is activated when it is exposed to the ultraviolet rays of our sunlight. Okay, that is one of the most important functions of our skin, synthetic. Very good. Next, okay, as we mentioned earlier, water balance because of sweating, because of perspiration. Okay, if our body has excess fluid, the tendency of our body is to perspire, okay, to do sweating. However, when our body senses or our body has deficit fluid in case of dehydration, okay, our body normally inhibit perspiration. You will not sweat in order to conserve water. That is water balance. And last but not the least is the protective function of our skin. Who can tell me how does our skin protects us?
Because it is protect our body
Mm-hmm.
from sudden shocks, maybe.
Who is this, please?
From sudden shocks.
No, the name of the student?
Abdullah.
Okay, Abdullah. Okay, from the word itself, thank you so much, Abdullah. Okay, from the word itself, protective.
Welcome.
Okay. From the word itself, protective means it protects us. Remember, our skin is the first line of defense. Okay? Aside from the fact that our skin protects us from the injury, if we have an accident, so technically it is our skin that protects us before the force or pressure is felt inside our body. Aside from that, our skin also protects us from any microorganisms. Okay? It protects us from any infection. That is how important our skin is. However, okay, there are some instances, there are some patients in the hospital wherein their skin integrity is, problematic. Especially, for example, if you have a patient who had surgery. So technically, the skin integrity is a problem because there's a wound. Or if you have a patient who had an accident, so technically the skin integrity is a problem, okay? So with those cases, technically the functions of your skin will be affected. So considering these functions of your skin, what would be our role as a nurse? What would be our nursing responsibility as a nurse? Number one is to maintain skin integrity. That is a very good role of a nurse. And this is especially applicable if you have a patient in the hospital who has been on the bed for several days, several weeks, and several months. So technically, if the patient is on the bed for several weeks and days, there is a tendency that the skin on the back of your patients will get what? Will get wound or sores. And as a nurse, we do not want that to happen. Number two, promote wound healing. That is our number two role as a nurse. Again, when you go to the hospital, you have a patient who had surgery. You had a patient who had an accident. And your patient has a wound. So what is your role? To make sure that the wound will heal as fast and as healthy as possible. And this afternoon, we're going to discuss how do we do and fulfill those roles as a nurse. Okay? Now, let us proceed. Now, as I mentioned earlier, one of the common problems that you nurses, future nurses, will encounter in the hospital when you take care of your patient is wound, especially if your patient had a Malia surgery, especially if your patient had an accident. Okay? You would encounter wound. Okay? And as a nurse, it is very important that you know how to manage the wound. Okay? But you can only be effective in managing the wound if you know exactly what type of wound it is. And our book provides us different types of wound. And it is very important for you to understand each type of wound so that you are able to provide the best intervention for our patient. So what is a wound? A wound is a break in a continuity of any bodily tissue due to an external action. It could be an accident. It could be intentionally cut. Okay? It could be caused by emergency. It could be caused by fractures. The resulting, all of those things would result to wound. Okay, now what are the different types of wound? The types of wound can be classified according to purpose or intention, according to depth, according to degree of contamination. We also have wound according to how they are acquired. And we're going to discuss one by one these types of wound. Okay, the first classification of wound is according to purpose. You know already what do we mean by purpose or intention. Okay, when we say purpose or intention, remember there are some wounds which are intently created. Okay, on the other hand, there are some wounds which are unintently done. Okay, number one is intentional wound. From the word itself, intentional. It is purposely done. Do you think there are wounds that are purposefully created in the hospital? Yes. Okay, and most of these intentional wounds occur during therapy or during certain treatment. I will give you an example. Okay, when you go to the hospital, the doctor might insert IV cannula so that you will have intravenous fluid with you. And it will create a wound. The wound is called intentional wound. Why? Because it is purposely created. Okay. Another example of wound are caused by surgical wound. You know surgical wound, as we mentioned earlier, amalia. That is one of the most classic example of intentional wound. Okay, surgical wound. Surgery is performed maybe because the patient has a problem and the doctor has to open the abdomen, to open the skin, thus creating wound. These are called intentional wound. I want you to look at in the photo right now. See? See, in the photo right now, the wound is uniformly done straight because of surgical procedure. Now, on the other hand, the most common types of wound are unintentional, which are commonly caused by accident or any emergency, or when you work football and then suddenly you hit the ground and you develop some wound in your feet or on your legs, okay? Or maybe vehicular accident, or maybe accidental fall, okay? Any of those things, okay, any of those events or situations where a patient's develop wound or the skin integrity is affected, they are called unintentional wounds. I think it's easy for you to differentiate the two because of the definition itself. Because of therapy, intentional; due to accident, unintentional wound. Okay. Now, wounds can also be classified according to depth. You know depth? How shallow it is or how hollow it is. That is called depth. Okay? And it's easy for you to identify wounds according to depth by just looking itself on the wound. What are the tissues involved? If the tissues involved are the dermis and epidermis. I know you are familiar with dermis and epidermis. Those are top layers of the skin. If those parts of the skin are involved, okay, we call it as partial thickness. However, if the involved part of the skin includes the fats, the muscles, the bones itself, okay, in addition to dermis and epidermis, it becomes full thickness. Again, it's easy for you to differentiate. If the skin involved dermis or epidermis, it is called partial thickness. However, if the wound goes beyond the fats, muscles, and bones, we call it as full thickness. Any questions with the two types of wound? According to purpose or intention, and according to depth. Did you clearly understand the differentiation of those types of wound? Or you have questions? Very good. Rafida says all clear. Okay, let us proceed. Now, this is very important. According to degree of contamination. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when you work as a nurse, you might encounter, a patient who had surgery or a patient who had surgical wound. Okay, and when you assess the wound, you can classify them according to degree of contamination. Do you have any idea what do we mean by contamination? When the wound is contaminated, what does it mean? Or if the wound is not contaminated, do you have any idea what is contamination?
It might
Yes.
be infected.
Okay, one at a time.
It's infection. It has infection.
Okay, when we see
No.
contamination, the wound is infected, or maybe there are some microorganisms, or there are some infections. Very good. Very good. Okay, now, what are the different types of wound according to degree? Degree means level or extent of contamination. Of course, we have number one, clean wounds. Wounds that shows no signs of infection or inflammation. Very easy. The wound is clean. Okay, there are also types of wound which is called as clean contaminated wounds. Okay, what does it mean? The wounds does not shows any signs of infection. However, there is an increased risk of becoming infected because of its location. What does it mean? There is an increased risk of becoming infected because of its location. Do you think there are parts of our body that can actually cause infection to our wound itself? What are the parts of our body that can infect our wound? Who has an idea? Remember our colon, our large intestine, our small intestines. You know colon, large intestine, our bowel. Okay. The bowel, the small intestine, and the large intestine. Okay. Remember, our waste products are there. If the wound is near to that site, if the wound is near to that area of our body, there is a risk for contamination. Why? Maybe because the waste or the fecal waste might easily be transferred to our wound. There are no signs of infection yet, but there is an increased risk of becoming infected because it is near to a part of our body which can actually cause infection. And the most common example of the part of our body that can cause infection are what? Our fecal material, which is located in our colon, in our large intestine, in our small intestine. Okay, it can contaminate the wound. Okay, how about contaminated wound? Okay, contaminated wounds are open, traumatic wounds, or intentional wound in which there was a break in aseptic technique. I know you are familiar already about aseptic technique. Okay, aseptic technique means it is a technique, okay, performed by a nurse in order to ensure that there are no microorganisms present. However, in this type of wound, you would see there is a major break in aseptic technique. It could either be the wound or the surgical wound of your patient. What? Maybe it was touched by, contaminated person. Maybe the nurse accidentally touched the wound without wearing gloves, or maybe wearing contaminated instruments. Okay, because of break in aseptic technique, or spillage from the gastrointestinal tract. What do we mean by gastrointestinal tract? Our stomach, remember, it has some fluid there. Those fluid can actually contribute to infection also if it comes in contact with the wound of our patient. Okay, or incision into infected urinary or biliary tract. You know our urinary system. Our biliary tract is in the abdomen. Those parts of our body can actually contribute to infection of our wound. Okay, and the last but not the least, dirty, infected wounds contains dead tissue, okay, and wounds with evidence of clinical infection. Very easy to understood. There are evidence of clinical infection. Now, what are these evidence of clinical infection? How do we know that the patient has infection? What are these clinical evidence that we can see if the patient has infection or if the wound is infected? What does the patient would feel or experience if the wound is infected? Any answer? Who can give me an example of clinical evidence of infection? If a person has an infected wound, what do you think are the signs and symptoms that this patient will experience? Swelling, very good. The wound might swell. Rafida says, pus. Yes, there are some discharges. Okay, Yusra says, there would be some redness. Inflammation, very good. Shaika says the WBC is elevated. And Aryam says the patient might have fever. Very good. Those are clinical evidence of infection. Okay? And if those things are present, you can conclude that the wound is dirty or infected. Now, wounds can also be classified according to how they acquired it. How did they get this wound? How did they acquire it? First is incision due to sharp instruments. You know, if you are chopping an onion or garlic at home and accidentally you chop your hand, you know, the wound is called incision. Okay, contusion, blow, blunt, a blow from blunt object. For example, you are playing football and suddenly you hit the wall of your house, and after a few hours you've observed that your elbow has, you know, bluish discoloration. It's a type of wound, but it is internally located, and you would observe that there's a purple or bluish discoloration in your skin. Okay, try to look at the photos on the side, number 2. See, it's like a black eye. Okay, if someone hits you in your eye, after a few days you will see a dark, you know, pigment or discoloration of the surroundings of your eye. It is actually called contusion. Number 3, abrasion. Abrasion is very easy. Many boys usually experience abrasion when they play football and they fall on the ground. Okay, and because of friction, their skin would have some scrape or abrasion, and it's very painful. Puncture is very easy. Skin penetration by sharp object. If someone stab you with pencil or knife or scissors, okay, see the photo on number 4. The patient was stabbed by a pencil. We call it as puncture. Laceration, tissues torn apart due to accident. You know, the skin is lacerated. The skin is divided. The skin is torn apart. See the photo on number 5. The patient had an accident. Look at the characteristic of the wound. That is called laceration. And the most common cause of that is accident. Okay? And the last is penetrating wound. When we say penetrating, okay, even the underlying tissues are included. For example, someone stabbed you on the abdomen. It's not only the skin of your abdomen that will be involved. In fact, your other organs inside of your body might also be affected. Maybe the intestine, maybe the stomach, or maybe your liver. We call it as penetrating wound. Okay, any questions with regards to the different types of wound? In your exam, I might give you some scenarios and you might identify the type of wound that is being asked from the scenario. Okay, it's easy. It's just a remembering question. Okay, now, let us talk more about the most important alteration in the skin integrity of your patient, which is pressure ulcer. Okay? And when you work in the hospital, you would expect several cases of pressure ulcer, especially if your patient has been on the bed for several weeks or several days, especially if your patients cannot stand up, especially if your patient is confined in the bed for several days. Okay, but before we discuss thoroughly the pressure ulcer, there is a question from your classmate which says, what's the difference between, can you repeat that question please? What is the difference between, I cannot see the question because I'm using cell phone. What is the difference? Can you repeat the question? Who was that student that is asking the difference between puncture and laceration? Can you open your audio?
My question is, what is the main difference between incision and puncture wound?
Incision and puncture?
Yes.
Okay. Incision means cut. Usually cut. Puncture is not necessary. Just for example, number one. Cut. The skin is divided into two. Okay? By a sharp object. For example, a knife. When you cut your fingers in your skin, you know, the integrity of your skin, I mean, the proximity of your skin will be separated into two. But puncture, it is not necessarily dividing the skin into two. It could be a hole. Oh, okay? Just like, for example, in our photo in number 4, it is not necessarily a straight wound which is divided into two parts. Okay? Okay, anyway, as I mentioned earlier, one of the most important, you know, concern among nurses when they work in the hospital is pressure ulcer. Okay? Especially if you work in a ward wherein the patient, you know, the patient has been on the bed for several days or several weeks or several days. Especially if your patient is comatose. Especially if your patient is paralyzed. Especially if your patients cannot move. These are common problems in the hospital. Pressure ulcer. In some books, pressure ulcers are called bed sores. Bed sores because these occur among patients who are in the bed for several days. It can also be called as decubitus ulcer, but most commonly it is called as pressure ulcer or pressure sores. Okay? And these pressure ulcers consist of injury to the skin and underlying tissue, usually over a bony prominence. What do you mean by bony prominence? It says here, injury to the skin and underlying tissue, usually over bony prominence. What do you understand about bony prominence? It says here, it usually occurs in an area with bony prominences. Who has an idea about bony prominence? What do we mean by bony prominence? Try to remember your back massage. Remember, there are some areas in your back wherein you apply, you know, specific massage on those areas. Those areas with bones, like the sacral, the iliac part, the scapular part. Remember, they have some bones there. Okay, and the skin over the bony prominences, the skin over your scapula, the skin over your sacral, the skin over your iliac are very much prone to pressure ulcer. I will tell you later on why those parts are prone to pressure ulcer. Okay, let's continue. Okay, as a result of force or a combination of movement. Okay. Now, going back to my previous discussion regarding bony prominences. I want you to look at the photo right now in the PowerPoint slide, specifically on a small photo of a person who is lying down. And you would see in the photo, there are red circles. Okay? The red circles are actually the pressure points. I know it was discussed already to you by Miss Jancy, remember, during positioning. In the lab also, your teachers emphasizes to put supportive devices to bony prominences. Okay? It says there, provide supportive devices. It could either be pillow or you provide donuts to an area with pressure points. Okay. Now, I want you to look at the photo. See, the occiput is also a pressure points. Okay. The scapular or the shoulder level, it has also pressure points. The elbows has a pressure points. The sacral and the iliac has a pressure points. And even the heel of the patient has a pressure points. Those pressure points are actually the area of the body which are prone to pressure ulcer. Why? Because those areas are located where the bone are prominent. So what if the bone are prominent? Why pressure ulcer usually occur in those areas? Okay, I want you to look at the bigger picture now. This is the physiology of pressure ulcer. This is how the pressure ulcer develops. Now, if a patient is lying on the bed for several days or several weeks, what will happen to these pressure points? See, the skin and muscle layers. Look at the photo. The skin and muscle layers, okay, in the bony prominences area are compressed. Yeah, because of the pressure, okay? Because you're lying down in the bed for several days. So what will happen to the skin and muscle on the bony prominences? There would be pressure because because the pressure is exerted into the bed. So what will happen if there is pressure in the skin and in the muscles? Technically, if there is a pressure, there is less blood supply to the area. Correct? Now, what can happen if there is a decreased blood supply to the area? Remember the importance of blood supply. Our blood carries oxygen. If there are lesser blood supply to the area, technically there is also less oxygen to the area. So what will happen to this area where blood supply and oxygen is reduced? So technically this, what will happen? The tissue and the blood vessels will damage. Why they will damage? Because there is no oxygen. There is no blood circulation. So the tissue and the blood vessel in these areas will damage. The tissues and blood vessels in this area will die. So what will happen if the tissues and blood vessels in this area dies? That's the time pressure ulcers develop. The patients will develop wound. The patient will develop some sores. Why? There is no oxygen. There is no blood supply. The tissue and the blood vessels are damaged already. That is how pressure ulcer develops. Now, any question with regards to the physiology of pressure ulcer? Do you understand now how pressure ulcer develops? Okay, I'll give you another logical example. If you are sitting on your chairs for several hours, what do you experience? I want an answer from, I will call a boy. Sulaiman. Sulaiman is here? Mafi? Almoed. Almoed.
Yes, doctor.
My question is, when you sit, for example, in the college, you are sitting for several hours in your chairs. What will you feel without standing? What will you feel after several hours?
Maybe I feel I don't comfortable with the sitting for several times.
You feel uncomfortable. Aside from being uncomfortable, what will you feel in your buttocks area?
Like a pressure on my back.
Yeah, it is actually a little bit painful. Thank you so much, Almoy.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If you are sitting for a long period of time, just like now, I'm sitting for several minutes. Okay, my buttocks is very painful already, and I keep on raising the right and the left buttocks. Why? Why is it painful? Because the oxygen is reduced. Okay? And when you have a patient who cannot stand, if you have a patient who is in comatose, okay, what will happen to them? They are on the bed for 2, 3, 4 days. Technically, the oxygen and the blood supply to the skin or to the muscles at their back are reduced, and eventually the tissue and the blood vessels will damage. After some time, you would see on their back they have some small wounds. It will start from small redness, and eventually it will enlarge in size, and eventually it becomes a wound like what you see in the photo right now. That is the worst possible pressure ulcer that you would see in the hospital. Okay, see? Can you see the photo right now? You can even see the fats, the subcutaneous tissue. You can even see the muscles inside the skin of your patient. This is called pressure ulcer. And you would observe and you would see those types of wound when you go to the hospital. Now, this is the last topic that I'm going to discuss before you still have time. Okay, now, what do you think are the possible causes, or what do you think are the possible factors that might influence the development of pressure ulcer? The first is friction and shearing. What do we mean by friction and shearing? That is one of the most important factors for the development of pressure ulcer, or a combination of friction and pressure. I'll give you an example. If your patient, for example, this is your patient is sitting on the bed for several hours. Eventually, the patient will what? Will slide down to the bed. Okay. Your patient who is in sitting position might slide down to the bed. So what will happen on the skin, on the buttocks area? There would be a friction, rubbing motion. See? The rubbing motion between the skin and the bed will cause pressure to the skin of your patient. And the pressure that is created between the skin of your patient and the bed itself will eventually contribute to the development of your pressure ulcer. That's why, if you can remember, in your lab, you were taught by your teachers how to position the patient on the right lateral, left lateral, and you do that every 2 hours. And the main reason why you ask by your teachers to reposition the patient every 2 hours is that we want to prevent friction and shearing. We want to prevent pressure ulcer to our patient. Okay, now, number 2 is immobility. How does immobility contributes to pressure ulcer? I'm going to call Reem Al-Riyami. Do we have Reem Al-Riyami here? I just talked to Reem this morning.
Yes, doctor.
Okay. Do you think a patient who is immobile means the patients cannot move, do you think those patients are prone to develop pressure ulcer?
Yes.
What do you think is the reason why?
Immobility of the client's move.
Do you think if the patients cannot move, he will develop pressure ulcer?
Mister, I can't hear you. Can you repeat again?
Okay, I'm asking you, if the patients cannot move, if the patient is immobile, Do you think the patients will develop pressure ulcer?
Yes, because he sits for a long time
Mm-hmm. Okay,
and in the same position.
very good. If the patient is immobile, the patient cannot move. The patient cannot, cannot assume sideline position. So technically, there would be a pressure on the skin against the bed of your patient. And as we have mentioned earlier, prolonged pressure on the tissues and muscles, okay, over the bony prominences will eventually cause pressure ulcer. That's why if you have a patient who is immobile in the hospital, if you have a patient who is paralyzed, who cannot move, it is very important that you turn the patient to the sides. Thank you so much. Okay, I need an answer from, oh, my favorite, Diana. Diana is here? Diana. Diana is sleeping. Okay. Abdullah. Abdullah? Do we have Abdullah here?
Yes, Rector.
Oh, yeah, maybe you are playing around. Please.
Yes, Rector.
Huh? I have a question, Abdullah.
Okay.
We're talking about the risk factors for pressure ulcer. Now, it says here, one of the risk factors for pressure ulcer is inadequate nutrition. How does nutrition contributes to pressure ulcer? Do you have any idea?
What? Again, please.
Okay, one of the risk factors for pressure ulcer is inadequate nutrition. If the patient doesn't receive enough nutrition, is it possible for the patient to develop pressure ulcer?
I don't know, please.
Okay, thank you, Abdullah. Okay, who has an answer? Can anyone open the audio and give me an answer? How does nutrition can be a risk factor for pressure ulcer? Let me see.
Because we know that pressure ulcer it can appear because of reduce in nutrition and oxygen. So reducing nutrition lead to death of the cell, and then pressure ulcer appear.
Okay, specifically, can you mention a nutrient that is very important for muscular repair, okay, or for muscle development?
Proteins, maybe?
Very good. Very good. Protein is very important. Why? Because protein, okay, is responsible for what? Muscular development or tissue development. If the person has a poor intake of protein, okay, the person is very prone to pressure ulcer. Okay, and aside from that, okay, if the patient is not receiving enough nutrition, normally the composition of the fats, the proteins, okay, and other tissue is also a problem. And remember, if the person is very thin, maybe because the person is not eating, the more the patient is very prone to pressure ulcer because there is no fats, there is no tissue that protects him from the bony prominences. Okay? And of course, as mentioned by your classmate, nutritional intake, specifically of protein, is very important. What else? Vitamin C is very important also to prevent wound and pressure ulcer. Okay, now, this is a very good risk factor number 4. It says here, one of the risk factors for pressure ulcer is fecal and urinary incontinence, which means, fecal incontinence means the patients cannot control fecal elimination. Urinary incontinence means the patients cannot control urination and voiding. If the patients cannot control defecation, if the patient cannot control urination, do you think the patient is prone to pressure ulcer? Let me see if someone can answer this risk factor. You may open your audio if you have an idea. This is specifically common among adults, among elderlies. Do you have some elderlies at home? Remember, they cannot even run to the toilet to defecate and urinate. Eventually, they will defecate and urinate in their bed. Okay, how does it contribute to pressure ulcer? Let me hear some answers from your classmates. Anyone? I will call. I think we have Bushra here. Bushra, can you open your audio?
Yes, doctor.
Yeah. Again, fecal incontinence means, remember, a normal individual, if we feel the urge to go to the toilet, we run to the toilet and defecate or urinate in the toilet, correct?
Yes.
However, there are some patients who cannot control anymore their defecation and urination. They just defecate and urinate at the bed. Do you think those patients are prone to develop pressure ulcer?
Yes, they will develop because they can't move from their bed. The body can get toxic.
Aside from the fact that they cannot move, what will happen to their skin if they urinate, if they defecate on the bed? What will happen to the skin which is exposed to urine and feces?
Get dirt, then they can get infection.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Remember, if the skin is soaked in the urine or soaked in the feces for a long period of time, what will happen to the skin? It becomes very soft, okay? Or it becomes macerated. Remember, even at home, if you are taking a shower for several hours, or if you are swimming in a swimming pool for several hours, what will happen to your skin? It becomes soft. And eventually you will see that your skin are macerated. And because of that, because of exposure to urine and fecal material, the skin of your patient will become soft and macerated. And if they are soft and macerated, it is easily eroded. It is easily affected by pressure. And pressure ulcer can easily develop among patients. Especially for fecal incontinence. Why? The feces, the stool of the patient, or our stool or our feces, it has some enzymes there, gastrointestinal enzymes, correct? And those enzymes can actually Can actually cause erosion of our skin. Or our urine, it has some chemicals, it has some enzymes there that can actually cause maceration or erosion of our skin. That's why, if we have a patient, who has incontinence, we always check whether the patient's defecated or urinated in the bed. We always change the diaper. We always change the clothing. Why? We want to prevent pressure ulcer. Okay, number 5 is decreased mental status. Decreased mental status means it could either be that the patient is unconscious. Unconscious. The patient is not awake. The patient is unconscious. If a patient is unconscious, is she capable of, experiencing some pain on the back? No, she will not say that my back is painful. I want to do sideline position. Unconscious patients cannot do that. Or if the patient is sedated because of anesthesia after surgery, the patients cannot tell you do side lying or lateral position. They cannot do that. Or if the patient has dementia. Do you know dementia? It is an elderly condition. Okay? It is a condition wherein the patients forget a lot of things. If the patient is unconscious, if the patient is sedated, they don't have the ability to inform you that they have some discomfort at their back. Okay? That's why they are prone to develop pressure ulcer. Number 6 is diminished sensation. Naturally, if the patient is paralyzed, the patients cannot feel sensation, the patients cannot feel pain. And if you cannot feel pain, without you knowing, your skin is already eroded. But you did not feel pain. Why? Because your sensation is diminished. Next is excessive body heat. Of course, it could contribute also to pressure ulcer. What else? Age, especially for elderly people. Why? Our baba, our elderly, our grandfather, our grandmother, what do you observe with the skin? Especially those who are 70 years old, 80 years old. They don't have fats anymore. They don't have enough muscles on their skin. They're very thin. Okay? And remember, the fats, the muscles, and the tissues are very important as it provides protection against injury or pressure. That's why pressure ulcer is very common among elderly people. Okay, what else? Chronic medical condition. What are these conditions? If your patient has diabetes, if your patient has cardiovascular disease, these are medical conditions that can actually contribute to pressure ulcer. Next is poor lifting and transferring technique. I know you are familiar with this because we always do this in the lab. That's why your teacher would always ask you, lift the patient. Do not pull the patient. Do not push the patient in the bed. You need to lift the patient. Why? Because we want to avoid friction. We want to avoid pressure on the back of the patient. That's why instead of pulling or pushing the patient, we lift the patient with our 2 hands. Or we use lifting devices. We already discussed that in activity and exercise. Next are hard support surfaces. What do we mean by hard support surfaces? The bed of the patient is very hard. Okay, there is no enough padding. Okay, the beddings of the patient is hard enough that the pressure is very very prominent. That's why when you go to the hospital, you would see that their beds, okay, are very soft, and that is very important because it provides support to the back of your patient. And last but not the least, incorrect application of pressure relieving devices. Now, what are these devices? These are supportive devices that we discuss in positioning. We provide pillow, we provide donuts, we provide additional linen on the back of our patient. These are called pressure relieving devices. These are the risk factors for the development of pressure ulcer. Now, any question? We will stop on this topic because we have 3 days to discuss skin integrity and wound, and I want you to really understand this topic. Our session for today will end with the risk factors. Any question or any clarification when it comes to pressure ulcer? Any questions or any clarifications with regards to pressure ulcer? No question? Okay. If you do not have any question, I have a question. Okay, I will call some names and you will open your audio and you will answer my question. Okay. I will call Tahani Al-Hikmani. Hello, Tahani.
Yes, doctor.
Okay. Okay, can you give me 3 functions of the skin?
What? Sorry, can you repeat it?
Can you give at least 3 functions of the skin?
It's sensory and protective.
Protective, very good.
Heat regulation.
Heat regulation, very good, thank you. I will call Intisar Al-Mawali. Intisar? Intisar? Okay, how about Nahian Al-Tabi?
Yes, doctor.
Okay, I have a question. Okay, can you give me at least one classification of wound?
What?
Can you give me any classifications of wound? We said wounds can be classified into several types. Can you give any classifications?
Degree of contamination.
Okay, can you give me an example of types of wound under degree of contamination?
Degree. Contaminated.
Okay, contaminated wound, Baden.
Dirty or infected.
Dirty or infected wound, very good. Okay, now I'm going to call Shifa.